Priscilla Paul.
Okay. Does your name mean anything, or were you named after someone?
My mother named it after a very good friend of my older brother because she thought he was such a great guy. I guess she wanted me to be a great guy.
Oh.
Do it again, Scott.
When and where were you born?
I was born in Rigby, Idaho in 1920.
Where were you born? In the hospital or at home? Were you in the hospital born or at home? And in what city and what country?
I was born at home in the city of Rigby, which I mentioned there, which is, of course, in the United States. And being born in the home, I'll tell you a little thing that happened there. That the doctor came and my poor mother had me on the kitchen table. And they asked the doctor how much I weighed, and he said, "Oh, this is a big boy." He says, takes me by like this and bounces me, about 11 pounds. I probably weighed about 8. Maybe I did weigh more.
No accuracy right then.
Okay. What were your parents like?
They were a little older because I was the youngest of all the children. In fact, I came along quite a bit after my youngest sister, 7 years under. So my mother was in her 40s and my dad was in his 50s. They were more like grandmas and grandpas, really, than mother and father as I grew up. Might sound a little strange to you, but my brother, who was the oldest brother, he was 19 years older than me, and he was more like my father in a way. He was the one that gave me my spanks. I didn't need very many, of course. Oh, yeah.
Okay. Who were your favorite relatives and why?
Well, I think at the time it would be my cousins and my aunts in Rigby after we had moved to Salt Lake, because every once in a while Mom and Dad would take us back up to where I was born and where a lot of my mother's folks lived. And I'd be with those cousins, and they were farmers types, and I'd sleep on the outside where the farmers slept in the big patio on the back of the big barn house, and it was just joyful now to think of it. I don't even like to sleep anything but a motel when I go somewhere. But it was great when I was young. I really thought it was wonderful. I'll tell you one thing that happened there. I came back the first time from Salt Lake. We'd been living here while I grew up from about 3 years old until we were on these visits when I was closer to 10 and that age. And first time we had breakfast, it was great. They had all these farm eggs and ham and everything, but then they offered me the milk. And they said, "Oh, you want some of this cow's milk?" And I drank a little bit. And I don't drink cow's milk. I only drink homogenized milk.
That's great.
What were your brothers and sisters' names, and when were they born in relationship to you?
Well, my oldest brother I told you about, he was born, all of us, he and most of my sisters were born in Salt Lake before my folks moved up to Rigby. And I came along with my younger sister, and I think I have the record, but it wasn't too important for you now, I don't think. But my younger sister and I were both born in Rigby, but the rest, my oldest brother and my next oldest brother, I had 2 brothers, then my oldest sister, and then my next oldest sister, and then my youngest sister, the one I told you about, that's 7 years older than me. She was born in Rigby. The others I'm pretty sure, without looking up, were all born in Salt Lake.
Did you ever get in trouble? Tell me what happened. And if you did get in trouble, did you get punished in certain ways?
Oh, yes. Not serious trouble. But I sure felt it was a couple of times. My next oldest sister was a really pretty girl. Yeah, they all were, but this one seemed to have dates coming constantly. And each time they'd come, we were living in a big home in Salt Lake, and it had a stairway that went upstairs, and it had actually about 4 levels. But as they would come and be in the parlor doing whatever they're doing, and I would sit up there in that stairway looking between the rails, shooting spitballs down there. And this one caught me and doing it, and he took me out in the back, strapped my back and my legs to a broom, and just let me lay there, strapped there for hours.
Oh,
I
man.
wouldn't do any more spitballing.
Sounds like something boys my age would do.
And then I must have been meaner than I thought, but one of my sister-in-laws, in fact the one of my second brother, she claims that I used to chase her around in the house with a butcher knife. I don't remember doing that, but she claims I did. And one time my dear next oldest brother, in those days there weren't very many cars, and they were just those little new type that were so great to have, and he had one, and boy, he was something else with that, without all the girls and everybody else, but he wouldn't let anybody touch it. But he parked it in our driveway once, and it was a big slanty driveway, and I was pretty young then too, and I got in that thing and was making out like I was driving, and I let off the brake and I rolled back down and over the street and down across the way and into the next house across the street.
Oh.
And we had a big vacant yard next to our place. It's covered with a big long area of big tall weeds. And I went there and laid right in the middle of those weeds, and they kept hollering for me and trying to find me. I stayed there for hours, all day long, and they were so upset that I got lost. I knew that if I came back later, they'd think, oh, it's so good to have you back. They wouldn't punish me so much. But that brother wasn't that understanding. He let me know. But the car wasn't damaged, but I was in the doghouse, that's for sure.
Oh, man.
Oh, I could go on and on, but let's go to the next one.
Did you have any nicknames?
Any what?
Nicknames, and if you did, how did you get them?
Well, when I was in high school, I participated in a lot of sports. In fact, really was good in a lot of them. And I was small, but I could run about as fast as anybody, and I had a lot of energy and could keep going forever. When I was playing basketball or whatever I was involved in, this one coach would call out to me, "Windy, keep going." And finally I was named Windy because not because I could talk so much. In fact, I was very bashful in those days, but because I
That's hard to
could hold
believe.
my breath, and not hold my breath, but just had a lot of breath to keep going. So this coach called me Windy, and all through high school, and quite a while after my friends called me that.
Where did you go to school, and what was your favorite subject, and what was your least favorite subject?
Well, I went to school in Salt Lake City in what is called Lafayette Elementary School, and it's right across, or was right across from the big LDS church office building. And we lived up the street, straight up toward the Capitol, just a block and a half up from the school. So I just turned on down to school there, went through that school, and then went down to Horace Mann, which is a lot further away, and a lot of walking back and forth. And from there, right close by, was West High, where I attended school. In fact, your mother attended there, and your her brother attended there, and her sister attended there, and her other sister attended. So we all went to West High, and I
Lafayette and Horseman.
started it, yeah, and they finished it. And they had a lot better grades than I did, and I'm sure, I know they did. They were all good. My favorite, probably would have to have been, things like debating and English and journalism. My least favorite was any type of math.
I can agree with that.
Must be inheritable.
Yep.
I don't think that's too good a thing not to inherit, because math is, it wasn't so much the math, well, even that was, but when it got into geometry and algebra,
Yeah.
And algebra.
somehow got beyond me. Okay.
Okay, do you have a favorite teacher? If you did, what was he or she like, and how did they influence you?
Oh, I had a lot of good teachers and a lot of bad ones. But, I think the one was probably at West High was my English and journalism teacher, because I was working on the newspaper as the sports editor of the paper, and she was good at helping. And I remember she didn't like certain things we did. I remember one, I probably told you this one, that she's the one that told me about the gum chewing cow.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The gum chewing boy and the cud chewing cow. Well, what is the difference? I know now. It's the intelligent look on the face of the cow.
That was her, huh?
Yeah. She was always making us take the gum out of her mouth in her class. And it went back to another time that was about gum that might be interesting to you. When I was bishop of our ward at Capitol Hill, one of the first times I was bishop, I went into the chapel, and there was President
Smith.
Yeah, it makes me laugh. Anyway, Joseph Fielding Smith, but when he at the time was about 91 or 2.
He was the prophet.
He was the prophet, and he was living with his daughter up in our ward at that time, and she was helping take care of him. But he was down there to be in the sacrament meeting, and of course, being the prophet and attending our meeting, we had to invite him, wanted to, of course, invite him to say a few words if he could, and he was willing, and he got up. But the first thing he said, he looked down at our deacons down on the front row right there, and he looked down at him and he said, "You deacons should not be chewing gum at the sacrament
Oh,
table."
man.
And all I looked down, and there all my dear old deacons were gulping down their gum.
Oh, man. Oh, I tried not to laugh because I tickled the camera.
All right, next.
Okay, did you work as a child, and if you did, what did you do?
Well, like most starting out, did some yard work for my neighbor, and then got a paper route, and I did that for quite a while. I even did paper routes when I was married, trying to make some extra money. I had the early morning Tribune route right there by the Capitol. The only good thing about it was that at the Capitol I didn't have to deliver them to the doors that early in the morning. I just put a whole package full of them. I got credit for all of them at the front door there, at the back. Not the front, but down where they picked them up. So that was nice. But one time I was going out early in the morning, and it was dark, and passed them out, and my friend lived in a little apartment there by the Capitol, and he was right in the apartment at the front on the lower floor, and he had, that morning I was delivering, he happened happened to be up just not sleeping well, and he was looking out the window, and he said all of a sudden, I'm walking along delivering the papers, and I disappeared. And he looked and wondered what had happened to me, went out, and I'd fallen down in a big ditch that they'd been digging to put something in.
man.
And I was hanging up there with my bags holding me up, and he had to dig me out of the...
Oh, man.
Oh.
But you're glad it's not you.
But I also have been called a jerk in my life because I was a total soda jerk. One of the most popular, isn't known now, but it's right down by the Paramount Theater, right in the center of town, called Keeley's. And boy, I worked there for a long time while I was going to high school and a little bit after. And they had, the owner made the best chocolate cake. And we'd be able to have it with ice cream whenever I wanted it. And work was hard, but I just remember that chocolate cake with ice cream anytime I wanted it. But I did a lot of that type of work. And later on, even while I was sort of young, I was still just starting in college, I wrote for the Deseret News Sports. Okay, next.
Okay, did you have any pets growing up?
I really didn't have much of a... The only pets I remember are the ones my kids had.
Yeah.
And they were
those.
some good ones.
Yeah.
But I don't know. We had a hard time feeding the kids, let alone pets. We were also during the Depression age when I grew up. Not much around. Go ahead. Next.
What were your favorite games to play as a child?
Well, as a child and with our friends, things like kick the can and all those type of things that some of them you even play. But later on I concentrated mostly on sports and playing basketball and tennis, this type of thing.
Okay, who were your best friends and what did you do together?
They were mostly fellows like me who enjoyed playing basketball, and of course we'd play the same games as some of the others. We used to make things that you've probably done it. We'd cut out a piece of board with a handle and a long nose on it, put a big rubber tube cut up into little strips in it so we could attach it at the back to a clothespin that was tied to the handle, and then we'd have games of shooting each other and whatever you want to call it, cops and robbers or whatever, and we'd bang away. If you hit the guy with this, he was gone and he was dead. But there's all kinds of normal sports that everybody got involved in. They were the ones that I really had the best friends with because they wanted to do the same things I did in that regard.
Hey, Dad, tell a story about during the Depression at Christmas time about Priscilla.
No, you're talking about how short amount of food there was at that time. It was nobody. I mean, it was not very even rich. I don't think had very much. It was some of the rich were jumping off
Buildings.
15-story buildings because they had gone broke. But anyway, it was a bad time for the whole nation, and nobody. It was really tough going. But some of the things we had to eat, which now people look at me eating them and think I'm a weirdo, but I love liver and onions. Now liver, you know, people think that's just part of a person's bowels. But you could buy liver for practically didn't cost anything, but everything else cost like crazy. So our folks bought what they could have to survive on. So I learned to, maybe didn't think I would, but I learned to love it. And If I wanted a sandwich and really had it good, other than just bread and butter, I'd put a little ketchup on it, and that would be a delicious sandwich.
Ketchup sandwich.
Ketchup sandwich, yeah. And those things weren't that jolly as far as that was concerned, but we got by. But I think your mother's talking about because of our situation being as bad as it was, when Christmas came, my dad wasn't working, nobody, the only person that was working was my next to the oldest sister, and she happened to be able to get a job. And what little she made was pretty much spent on the family to eat. So Christmas came around and there was just no plans of any Christmas that I recall. In fact, they told me I was maybe about 12. They just told me that they wanted to get me something. I was the youngest. I was 7 years. The others were all old, really. And for Christmas, I mean, they could understand and know that things were bad. But they had to try to convince me that it wasn't going to be any good either. And so I was pretty well convinced nothing was going to happen. And so we went down Christmas morning just to go down. I don't know why we bothered to go down, but we did. And nothing was there. And my sister was working, said, "Oh, look around, maybe Santa Claus dropped something," and he might have had something he could have dropped around here. And so I looked around, and behind the sofa I found a beautiful sheepskin coat. And oh, it fit me, like, oh, I said, what? Oh, Santa. And then later on, in fact, I loved it so much I slept in it. I remember I had it on all the time, and then I found out that my next oldest sister had saved just so I could have something, not only something to play with, but I needed to have something to go out in the cold to go to school and things, and so it had to be practical. And yet some of you might think, oh, no toy and anything, but I'll tell you, that was my choice toy to me. And I sure love my sister. Even to this day I tell her how much that meant way back in those days for her to do that sacrifice, what little she had, to get me that.
Great.
Okay, what was your happiest memory in your childhood, and when did it happen?
Well, that was a happy one, and then there was happy for me when I was able to be chosen to play in any sport, to be one of the top players and to participate and enjoy it so much. In my youth, I guess that's where I had the most happiness. I did have a happy time going. Didn't think it was going to be happy because the bishop, I was a deacon and just been a deacon, and you had to give a talk and things, and they were going to go up to the Martin Harris Cemetery with all of us as sort of a excursion up there, and I didn't know what it was about or anything else, why we were even going, who he was practically. And the bishop signs me before we leave. He says, "I want you to tell all about your trip up at Martin Harris and give a talk in sacrament meeting." That almost ruined going up there, but I remember preparing the talk and giving it. And I think that start by the bishop really helped me through the years to be able to prepare a talk and give talks later on, which I had to do. Anyway, I don't know where that came out of, but go ahead.
What was your saddest time in your childhood?
Saddest time? Well, that other was a little sad before it turned out great, but really, in my childhood, I just don't recall too many sad times. Thank goodness.
Cool. What do you think were the most important things that your parents tried to teach you?
Well, I think the most important is the need to pray every day and often as you need to. And sometimes I'd forget, but I didn't do me much good to forget, because I can't remember one evening that if I was about ready to go to bed, I'd hear my grandmother say, "Have you said your prayers yet?" Okay.
What things or people influenced your life the most people as a young person?
As a young person? Well, I think my older brother, who was a great inspiration and a great man, really, and he really did influence my life considerably as sort of my father example. And in his business world, I admired what he was doing, and his church work. I remember even when he was a priest, that I would look up to him and just say, "Oh, isn't he great up there being the priest, doing the sacrament?" I just, not whatever he did, I was always saying, "Isn't he doing good?" And he did. I guess he'd have to be one of my best examples in my youth. And a little later on, the sports editor of the Deseret News, Les Goetz, how he helped me and how to write and how to put them together, and he gave me some really hard assignments, and for quite a while I was just sort of the background person, but he finally developed me where I would get my byline for all the articles that would go in the, like you've seen, by whoever gives the news deal. And he was good to work with and develop me.
Grandpa was a writer for the Deseret News sports section. Did you know that?
I think it mentioned earlier.
Yeah. What great person have you met in your life, and what made them special?
Well, I've had the golden opportunity a lot of you heard about, and I'll just tell you. Heber J. Grant was the first president I knew, and he was a great example because I'd look up to him to what he did. But later on, I had the opportunity in my work at the airlines of associating with all the rest of the presidents that came after him, right up through President Kimball. Then I retired, and the rest of them I happened to know because a couple of them, because they lived in my ward when I was bishop. So I've had the rare opportunity of being very close in some ways to several of the church presidents.
Cool. Can you tell us any stories about that, Dad?
Oh, I've told a lot of them to you, haven't I?
These kids probably haven't heard them. You getting tired?
No. Mom's heard a million times. Well, as long as I mention President Kimball, the most of the times I had was with him was when he was very old, and he was still traveling, but he had a hard time getting around. And in those days, we didn't have like they do at the airport now, where you go down the concourse, go across the bridge that goes right to the plane. In those days, you'd go down the concourse, then go outside and have to walk across the ground and then up some stairs to get into the plane. And of course that was very hard for these older presidents of the church to do. And so they would have special arrangements for them when they'd come to the airport, that they would arrive in the front in the car, and then one of the officials at the airport would get in the car and take them around through the gates and down to the plane to go on. But of course there was security in effect too at that time, because they had to go through security. Yet, being an official of the airport, I could meet them out in front and take them through the gates where the car could go without having to go through security. And so this way the presidents, President Kimball and some of the others that I dealt with, we would take them out to the plane in that way. And this one time, President Kimball, they told me he was coming and to go out and we'd go out and meet him and take him around to the plane so he could get on easily. And as I went out to the front to meet him in the car, there was the driver and two people in the front, and there was President Kimball and his wife and another person in the back, and it was chock full. But I had to also ride in the car to take him around, and I apologized and I said, "Well, I'm sorry, but I'm afraid one of you are going to have to walk down the concourse and get on the plane in your normal way because I have to be with the car." And what does President Kimball do? This little man, he with his wife, he hunches himself up on it. He says, "Get in here, get in here." So I go in and sit back, and I'm sitting back like this, and there the President Kimball's up like this, sitting while we drive around to the airport, just showing how humble and concerned about other people he was. Well,
Okay, stop.
you would, what?
Print it
Go.
off.
Turn it off?
How did you meet your wife?
Well, she came down from Canada and she was staying in an apartment, or a home actually, with some other girls, big home. There were single girls, and she was going to school. And she came to our church for the first time down in the men and gleaner room downstairs. They were taking the roll, passed it around, but I think what happened is that the new ones didn't have their names on it, so I didn't know where they put their name on, but I made up a new roll of my own and handed it around to send it to her to sign it.